So if you. Thank you. If you can go ahead with the roll call, please.
Yes.
Corbin,
Here.
Alana. I see Alana's name.
Here, I'm here, sorry.
Bonnie. Present. Stacy,
Here.
David. Chris.
Present.
Adam. Adrian.
Yeah.
Aaron.
Here.
Sabrina. Holly.
Here.
Suen. Here. Jonathan.
Here.
Matt. Matt. Patty. Here. And Jessica.
And I believe the will not give us
Okay,
heads up that he will not be making the meeting.
Okay.
So thank you so much, and we're gonna go ahead and start with public comment. And
Matthew Shake.
make sure you do not share any of your personal information. All right.
Yes.
Let me go ahead and get my tricky timer out.
Okay.
You do have 2 minutes.
Yes.
Go ahead and please get started.
Okay, yeah, I only have 2 minutes. I apologize for speaking quickly and being blunt if I'm blunt here, but so 2 things today. At the end of my comment last month, there was a Parks employee here who said that Prosper Portland has a notification requirement for the use of drones, that he could send that to me afterwards. Nothing was sent to me. I'm sort of surprised and sort of not surprised by that. If I had to guess, I'd say that I'm somehow been instructed, or that the Parks Department employees have been instructed not to communicate with me. I really don't know. In any case, I stand by my assertion that the quote notification requirement for drones doesn't exist. Even if it did exist, it would be completely insufficient. How about a consent requirement rather than a notification requirement? He also mentioned there being, that I was requesting an outright ban on drones. The drones are already outright banned in parks. There's an exception that's carved out where if you're a media company, then you can apparently use Parks Department to take off your drone, fly into residential areas, film private residences, and all you have to do is pay the Parks Department some money. Anyways, I'm a broken record on all of this. It's apparent the Parks Department does not care about this. It's been 5 months now. I'm not sure anybody here cares about it either, but I'm just, again, putting this out there for the public record. Okay, second thing, and this is not directly related to drones. I have never expected anyone on the board here to actively take up my personal cause. I will take a moment just to say that one of the stated purposes of this board per Title III of the City Code is to, quote, provide a forum for public discussion and decision-making about park issues, bringing a citywide and long-term perspective to neighborhood-based issues. That's a quote. Me speaking into the void of these meetings does not really constitute a forum for public discussion and decision-making. Me being summarily ignored by the Park Department and everyone here does not also constitute a forum for public discussion and decision-making. So I guess I'd ask, where is that forum? I would like to participate in it. I don't think it exists. This is not it, I don't think. And that's it.
That is your
Thank you.
time. Thank you so much.
See you again next month.
Did you have an update for that? I saw it within our records, but there.
Yeah, So I can follow up
If you
with
could, that'd be great.
right now and make sure he has the information he needs. So the Portland, the production crews are required to distribute a written notification of filming activity, including drone footage 3 business days in advance of any permit that Prosper Portland, the Portland Film Office give. And so this is on their website and a requirement that they have. That's for any film permit, and then it's sometimes a park would be involved in that film permit. But I can step out and make sure you have this information and
Okay, I think you're misunderstanding that rule that.
But can I follow up with a
Sure,
question?
yeah.
Because you, unfortunately,
Yeah,
you had
no,
your
it's
2
fine,
minutes.
yeah.
I think what the concern is that a private resident is being filmed without their consent. And is there any way to prevent that from happening, even though it's not within the Parks and Recreation jurisdiction.
Right.
Can this community member find satisfaction with Prosper Portland to make sure that their private residence stays private, irregardless, if that's a word,
Right.
of what is being permitted for filming? And I think the privacy issue is at the center of this conversation.
Yeah. So I can kind of do two things. I can help connect you to Prosper Portland, but I'm sure you're maybe already connected with, but I'm happy to introduce you virtually. And then the other thing is we could have Prosper Portland come here and, you know, give a presentation to this group if you like. But I don't,
I think that would be important, and only because I understand it's outside our jurisdiction, so unfortunately, we can't leverage that decision making power here, because we're essentially, if I understand it, a launching pad. And not necessarily regulating.
well, Prosper Portland issues the film permits for the city of Portland, so they would be kind of the regulatory body to have any kind of restrictions like that.
If we can get
Yeah.
them on the agenda, so we can have this
Sure.
conversation, because you can see it's very important to this community
Mhm.
member, since this is the third time, I believe. Even though it's outside our jurisdiction, we'll do our best.
That's fine. The Parks Department do also issue permits for this one, so
Right,
again,
but-
I disagree with what's being said here, so just.
I understand that, but I also have to understand the policy that we have to follow.
Yeah, just wanted to put that out there. I can say it again next month. I don't know, it's
All
2
right.
minutes, sorry.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
You should say.
Great, thank you. Is there any other public comments?
Where?
Oh, come on up, please.
Thanks.
Please have a seat. Could you please sign in?
Sure.
You can do it after you talk or before, it's up to you. But please introduce yourself. You'll have 2 minutes. Please refrain from giving any personal information such as a phone number or email address. And when you're ready, you can go ahead and start your 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Bob Salinger. I'm the Urban Conservation Director for Willamette Riverkeeper. I have a long history with parks. I've been working on parks issues in Portland since the 1990s. I did 2 tours of duty on this committee. I think I've served on all of your bond and levy measures since that time as well. I come to you tonight for the first time ever to express my concern about what happened at City Council a couple of weeks ago, when parks effectively took tree programs and natural area programs out of the Bureau of Environmental Services and had them transferred over, and also successfully opposed a proposition for a new Bureau of Natural Resources. We were on the opposite side of that issue. I respect the right to disagree, but I think it's important to understand that the community was aligned strongly against this, overwhelmingly against what parks did, including many of your long-term stakeholders. We think it was ill-advised. We don't think Parks is prepared to take on those responsibilities. It was a last-minute amendment that came in the evening before the hearing. And we don't think the financial and legal and resource issues associated with this were adequately considered in any way, shape, or form. We think it was an ill-advised decision. That being said, it's done. And so I just wanted to give you a sense of, as a stakeholder, what we're hoping for going forward. Number one, we think it's essential that at this point, Parks holds natural resources harmless. Too often, it's the first thing that gets cut in a budget scenario. But if you're going to take on additional natural resources, we think it's important that from here on out, you fund those at the level they're at or higher. Don't take them on if you can't afford it. Number two, we think it's critically important that you bring all of your natural areas up to good or excellent condition. Most of your natural areas are not in good or excellent condition. I think the community's been very patient about that because we know you have a lack of resources, but if you're going to take on more, we think it's incredibly important that you step up and bring them all up and have a plan to do that in the near future. And lastly, we think it's important that you step in.
So go
I'll
ahead,
finish
wrap
up.
it up. Yeah.
Last point is that you step into the regulatory compliance arena. The BES and natural areas and trees are part of a much bigger regulatory compliance effort. Parks has always shied away from that role, but if you're going to take on those responsibilities for those areas, you also have to take on those regulatory roles. We think you took a situation that had a possibility for improvement and an opportunity for real discussion and short-circuited that process. We think that's unfortunate. We're here to work with you on that, but I think it's important to understand that the expectations have gone up dramatically, at least among some of your stakeholders, because of what happened.
All right, thank you. That is your time.
Appreciate it.
Make sure you sign in. Thank you for coming
Thanks for having me.
here again. So does that conclude our public comments, or do we have anybody online who would like to participate in public comments?
I don't see any other names.
If so, please raise your hand. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, so moving forward with general announcements. Are there any general announcements? I have a general announcement that I'm gonna make. So the PPNR, our Portland Parks and Recreation advocacy letters created to support the Urban Forestry Commission has been sent to the Office of Government Relations on Monday, November 13th of 2023 for review. The board members do have a copy of the draft letter either electronically or in a hard copy there with me. The board advocacy letter was discussed at our last meeting on October 10th of 2023, in which I quote, "The board authorized the chair and vice chair and whoever they wish to help them to draft the letter draft the Housing Production Advisory Council letter with a copy to the city council, making points similar to those made in the Urban Forestry Commission letter, with addition of any other topics germane to the board's work that they feel necessary to include with consultations from the Office of Government Relations." End quote. Once reviewed, a copy will be sent to the Portland City Council and Governor Kosak's office. I will like to personally thank board member Ali Birdman for spearheading this advocacy letter by providing a solid draft from which to work. And I want to also thank my co-chair, Alana, as well as Casey and Ali for wordsmithing, which got us to what I think is a strong advocacy letter in support of the Urban Forestry Commission, Portland residents, and the city. I would also like to thank the Portland Parks Board for entrusting us with this duty of carrying out the Portland Parks and Recreation Board's work. A copy of the letter will be sent to Portland City Council and Governor Kosak's office, hopefully before the November 17th date in which HPAC meets. And if possible, I would like the letter to be entered into public record once complete. Okay, as the city of Portland is restructuring its government to serve our communities and residents, so shall the Portland Parks and Recreation Board. And we'll be, if I remember, if this is still correct, we're gonna be moving to a webinar style in the future. Zoom meeting framework, which will allow us to welcome the public into our meetings more effectively and efficiently. And we'll continue to keep the 15 minutes aside for both public comment at the beginning, at the end. And we're going to create space during the board meetings for public comments on specific agenda items. So please look out for that. So that's the end of the announcement. Moving forward to approve the October meeting minutes. Like to call a vote. Do we have a motion to approve the October meeting minutes?
Sorry, I submitted a brief correction. I want to make sure that that was shown in the record.
Okay.
I also received a correction from Casey.
Great. Any other corrections? Do we have a motion to approve the October meeting minutes?
I move to approve with the submitted corrections. It looks like Adina's got her. It's
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the October meeting minutes, either raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any of those opposed? Anybody abstaining? Have one abstention from Adam. Thank you so much. Moving on to the the director's report. Question. Go ahead.
Just a point of order on the HPAC letter. Jen Cairo sent an email just a few minutes ago to you and I around removing the word street from in front of trees in the third paragraph of the letter because it is unnecessarily restrictive.
Okay,
So I just wanted to point that out as people review the letter.
is that the only comment?
That's all that she wrote. Jen, did I cover that? Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah, That's it.
Thank you so much. Okay, wonderful. Moving forward to the director's report.
Thank you. I have a few items to cover. First, I wanted to note that 2 weeks ago, the Oregon Recreation and Parks Association had their annual meeting here in Portland. It's in Portland every other year. I was able to provide some opening remarks and serve on a Women in Parks and Recreation Roundtable with a few other park directors, and that was a lot of fun. The staff developed and presented 12 education sessions during the association conference, and also hosted 4 site tours to various locations. So it was I was able to see a couple of previews of some of the talks, but unfortunately not attend all of them. But the topics were really informative and well received. So just wanted to give kudos to the staff for that. Also, super excited and proud that the work the Bureau and its stakeholders have undergone over the last several years around community listening and learning, updating our organizational statements. As you know, the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland report was released electronically. It is now, you have hard copies that have been made available to those who are here in person. Those who are joining us virtually will have the report mailed to them. It's over here on the, okay, so, and just huge kudos to the team, to Todd and Nicola, Tim, and so many other staff people who brought this over the finish line. It's a really lovely report. I sent a pretty exhaustive email regarding the city charter reform, city organization work, and the work session update. So I won't get into depth here, but I will note that the new organizational chart takes effect on July 1, 2024. It is likely that an interim city administrator will be named earlier in the year. And that person will work really closely with the current city council, who will oversee the service areas until the new form of government officially launches in January of 2025. As sort of noted by Mr. Salinger, that approving the resolution, the council didn't commit specific resources to fund each aspect of the org chart, but that will happen through the budget process, which we've begun, and so that work will be reviewed by the Budget Advisory Committee as we move forward over the next few months. Just as a reminder, some of the highlights of the organizational structure resolution was that there will be 6 deputy city administrators, an equity officer, a sustainability officer, and an assistant city administrator, 6 service areas, budget and finance, city operations, community and economic development, public safety, public works, and vibrant communities, which is the new name for the Parks and Recreation Service Area. We will be joined with the City Arts Program and Children's Levy under Vibrant Communities. As noted, there is an addition of the citywide operational natural area and tree management to the service area with Parks and Recreation and the Children's Levy. And that resolution included language that stated that as part of the fiscal year 24-25 budget, all city bureaus should align natural area and tree management positions, funding, and services to an operational natural area and tree management unit with Parks and Recreation. This excludes the Bull Run watershed management for obvious reasons. We anticipate that we'll continue our conversation with this board, both through the back and otherwise, over the next few months as we proceed with this work. I'm gonna drop a couple of links in the chat momentarily, so that folks can read up if they were unable to previously. I'll just pause there for a minute because it's a lot of information and I have a few more items.
Opening the floor to any board questions? Adrian, go ahead.
Just a big question, excuse my ignorance. So how are the natural areas managed now? And so, I understand the change, but
Yeah.
I just want to
It's a
kind of,
good question. So natural areas are largely, the majority of the natural areas are managed by Parks and Recreation. We have approximately 8,000 acres of natural areas that we manage. We have been working very closely with the Bureau of Environmental Services. In fact, we have an active interagency agreement around sort of co-management of certain other natural areas. Bureau of Environmental Services currently has about 800 acres of natural areas under their purview. There are a few other natural areas that are in other portfolios as well. So we're gonna be working with all of the bureaus to sort of to identify the exact areas where there's an intersection and continue to have that conversation.
and those, just as a follow-up question, those are separately funded, so those 600 acres under BES, that has a line item and budget now? Okay,
It's 800.
800.
800, sorry.
That's okay.
I mean, land management is bifurcated just like everything else in the city of Portland by bureau. So bureaus are assigned management responsibilities, except for ratepayers where Bureau of Environmental Services and Water maybe purchase the property with ratepayer dollars and have special restrictions around that. Everything else is kind of owned by the city of Portland, but managed by a bureau. So transportation has natural area managed by a bureau. Parks has natural area managed by a bureau. Different bureaus, all with different standards, all with different, practices. So this idea of like one city approach to the day-to-day, month-to-month management of natural areas is kind of a trend we're gonna see more and more, I think, in the city of Portland, where we have a certain service standard for a certain service we offer. I think,
Thanks.
Thank you. Sabrina.
Yeah, I am under the weather, so I apologize. I sound crazy, but my question is in regards to kind of what was just discussed around like the city reorganization. And a couple things. I think on the first hand, I am wondering how we can get engaged before decisions are made. I know for all of us, we're on the board and might be connected in other ways. And I don't feel like there was an opportunity for me or even community members at large to engage ahead of time. And so I know that might not be, anyone's under anyone's wheelhouse within this space, but I do think that that's really important. That's one of the bullet points that we wrote in our Parks Board letter. And I feel like I keep hearing about things after something happened. And so that's the one point. So I'm wondering, what can be done about that? What can I do? What can we do as a board to ensure that folks who are in spaces like this and other community members who are not in spaces like this have the opportunity to get engaged and give their input before those big decisions are made? Secondly, I think I'm maybe just a little confused around like the public testimony that was just given was about parks taking on more services. So I'm wondering if that decision that was made is that people who are in BES or in other bureaus are now going to be a part of the Parks Bureau, or because I understood that there was going to be a larger natural, resource. So I'm feeling like I just am not connecting the dots, and maybe it's me, but maybe other folks are feeling like that too. So maybe there can be a little clarity too, because it sounded like the decision that was made in council was that everybody's just going under the Parks Bureau. But maybe that wasn't what I read. So I'm wondering. So yeah, and sorry if that wasn't super polished. Again, I'm not feeling great.
No, it's okay. Thank you, Sabrina. Well, I would say regarding the charter reform and the city organization, there was a public process where folks could provide feedback on things that were proposed over the last 6 to 9 months. I believe there's been some feedback that towards the end of the process that moved very quickly, and that there was less of an opportunity for community members to engage. The amendments or the actions that we just spoke about were amendments that were put on the floor. One was put on the floor by Commissioner Mingus Maps, one was put on the floor by Commissioner Dan Ryan. And those happened the day before. One was the day before, and one was the day of the public hearing, or thereabout. So it happened very quickly. It was not, the public hearing date on the 1st was open to the public. Speakers signed up. We had Ilana from the board who testified. I'm not sure if there's anything else to, am I missing anything from that? I will say that the natural resource service delivery work that was noted in the resolution and that Mr. Salinger just noted, that work will continue. So this action does not preclude the conversation around the larger conversation around natural resource service delivery. So there will continue to be an opportunity for the board to engage in that. You may recall that, I can't even remember which month it was that we came and we had a presentation by Eco Northwest to talk about that work. So so that work will continue and the board will continue to have an opportunity to engage in that.
And I think we're trying to share real time for those of you that have been involved when we learn about these things as well. And part of the dynamic maybe we're seeing is these aren't always like 5-0 votes. Like some of them are 4-1, 3-2 votes. And so there's not actually a unified proposal. They're actually building it through the legislative process. So having statements in advance that the Parks Board wants as kind of stakes in the ground of the, however you want to say that about process or about the legislative outcome would be really helpful in advance. And then the day of and the week of it, I think it is going to be pretty dynamic. And there's a lot in the budget process probably coming up at us that will be done through the legislative process, not just the big proposal, right?
And I'm happy to take some of the heat for you because I'm Chief of Staff for Commissioner Ryan and this did come fast. And it came in response to another amendment that was on the table and doing what was in the best interest of the Parks Bureau, to be quite honest, is how we felt what we were doing. And we are moving so fast with this transition that I hear what you're saying, Sabrina. It's good to hear your voice, by the way. I haven't seen you in a long time. I hear what you're saying in terms of being brought along, and I think it's going to feel faster and faster as we move through this year. It's feeling that way even for me, and I'm in the middle of it. So,
and maybe as we go through this process, I think you kind of have this with your chair or vice chair, but have a designated person for that month, especially when we get to like April and May when the mayor's proposed comes out, and then amendments for the budget will be in May. That the board can respond during a week if they're really interested in weighing in.
And if I can chime in and Sabrina asked, and let me know if I'm capturing the sentiment, your sentiment is that because we are the Parks and Recreation Board, we weren't able to fulfill our duty by having a public forum for the decision-making process. And so as quickly as we're moving through this charter reform and the restructuring of the government, what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling from a lot of our board members is that we're not necessarily moving at the speed of public trust. And so how can we figure out a way that we can hold a forum for community members to come and actually acknowledge their thoughts before we have to designate one person to speak for a whole board that hasn't had the time to digest and understand the full process.
Yeah.
So that is what you're requesting, is that in some ways the board's power has been usurped through a quick process and not allowing us to connect to community members, into the community and to the residents and to the public in a meaningful way. And so unfortunately, when we don't move at the speed of trust, rumors get created and there's a lot of bad press around it. So if we can find a middle ground between moving swiftly and nimbly, but also inviting the community in to our meetings to have these rigorous discussions is where I think we can find a way through this.
Yeah. And so,
Um,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think, yes, thank you, Dr. Corbin. And I think the other point too is that, you know, to really utilize the strength that we have within the room on the Parks Board, and you know, of course, everyone at the Parks Bureau is knowledgeable, but also us being able to give that input on the implications of the Parks Bureau and what different changes, you know, will mean. Because when I read the amendments, at least I didn't quite interpret it as everybody goes under Parks, but the public testimony kind of said, oh, everything's going to go under the Parks Bureau now. And I think about our maintenance backlog. And so again, you know, just giving even us in the room the opportunity to be able to have a conversation around what are implications, you know, for the Parks Bureau, because I know many of us, you know, are pulled into different kind of strategizing committees or finance things, and us knowing about big decisions like that ahead of time. Again, maybe that decision hasn't been made yet, but again, I personally feel a little, you know, behind the information. So
I'd say the decision's been made, but the details are still open. And so like I said, I think there's still an opportunity for engagement through the back and then beyond that. You know, with the Natural Resource Service Delivery Work Plan. So, and I feel like I don't disagree. I don't mean to sound contrary at all. I totally agree. And I also feel like this was an anomaly that we didn't have control over. And so I think all we can do is acknowledge that and try to do better moving forward, but also just recognizing that, you know, we have to manage expectations. And I don't think the board should feel that they were unable to fulfill their duties when the sort of, you know, the factors, you know, limited that ability. So I appreciate and I'm hearing everything, and wherever we can make improvements, we should. But I do feel like this was the whole process. I mean, you got to figure this is one amendment of, how many were there?
12 or 13.
12 or 13. Some of which were creating entire new positions like on the fly.
Yes.
So, I mean, just trying to put things in
It's not
perspective.
ideal. I don't even want to pretend like it's ideal. It's just what it is currently happening with the transition of government.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be done in a short amount of time, and it feels hard, and we can definitely work to improve with you.
I'm going to acknowledge that Alana's hand is
Yeah, I
up. You
have
can
the-
hardly see it because
I have her down.
it's blending into her curtain.
And if I could just dovetail off of that before going to Alana, if we can get a heads up or information as soon as possible, if we can use this forum as a way to educate the public on the process as we go. I understand that you already do it, but kind of like doubling down as we get the information so we can, again, move nimbly, but at the speed of trust. All right, thank you. Alana, please go ahead.
Yeah, I actually would love to weigh in on this if that's okay. I had tried to put my hand up under announcements and wasn't quick enough, but I do think that in updates to the board under announcements, we need to make sure that we're sharing with the board what testimony was given, because that was action that was taken by a small group between board meetings. And I think we try to use announcements to do updates on those pieces. And I'm sorry, I'm not in the room with you all today. Given how quickly things were moving, as you all heard, and given the letter that the board had approved previously, and given that there was a debate between two amendments on whether a new natural resource area should sit within the same service area as parks or should sit within a different service area, the service area around infrastructure that parks had previously been in, the board weighed in, and I'm giving this report because I was the one giving the testimony, but there were a couple of us who were working on whether or not we wanted to say anything specifically to reiterate the importance of having natural resources aligned with parks and having them within the same service area. So we did hear public comment that we were saying it should be part of parks. What the testimony that was delivered on your behalf said was that they should be aligned in the same service area, which is what we had said in our original letter. We also reiterated the importance of engagement from folks across the city and the engagement from folks across the city that this board brings and that we also try to capture through the public process to remind counselors how important it is to be hearing from everybody across the city. We specifically didn't weigh in on a couple of other pieces that were up for debate at that meeting that we had considered weighing in on because they hadn't been part of the board's original letter, and we didn't want to get out ahead of everybody on some new issues, including going a little deeper on arts, which we had touched on a little bit in our original letter, but hadn't weighed in on comprehensively yet. So that was the thrust of the testimony that we gave on behalf of the board. And I think ties into a bit of what was just in the director's report. I'm sorry to say this at the wrong time and that I didn't get my hand up faster earlier.
Thank you so much, Alana, for that clarification. Is it possible to get the actual quote from the testimony and enter it into our record as well?
Yeah,
Thank
I
you so
think
much.
you and staff all have it. I can resend it to make sure that it's on the record for the entire board as well, Dr. Corbin.
Thank you so much.
Some additional items.
Lynn, go ahead.
We've heard multiple times saying that things moving very fast. And things are going to move faster and faster. Personally, I love change because change is the door opening to opportunity to make things better. But I also understand that when things are moving very fast and it becomes more diverse in terms of who will be involved and be created as well as making decisions. Sometimes at the speed of trying to get things done, meet the deadline, decisions tend to fall into let's do what we know how to do it. Then it becomes a little bit of same old, same old. So we all know things are going to change, things are moving fast, but keep saying it is not going to make things slow down or make things in a very kind of mindful way how to make decisions. I suspect we're going to keep hearing things are moving fast, but exactly how we're going to do things differently so that we don't fall into just making the deadlines and not generating quality solutions. Calling out is one thing. Can we help make things better? That's something I was sitting at the art talk. I love the idea, but I yet need to see exactly what are we doing that is going to be different, other than changing kind of the leadership on who's taking care of that. I have my personal idea, but I want to make sure that we don't keep calling out, but yet not making any effort to really make change.
Thank you, Celine. And I would like to go back to our last meeting in which co-chair Alana asked the working groups to come up with language that we can use on the fly from your points of view, from your working group / committees. That way, when we need to move nimbly and pivot, that we have the language already reviewed by the board members. Otherwise, we're gonna always fall behind. And as you say, we'll be, why didn't we have enough time? So I will ask all the working group chairs if you have the wherewithal to provide time during your meetings in December and possibly in January to bring up these really good talking points that when we need to move quickly, that Alana and I can pull from it and it's already board approved. And as Alana pointed out, because things were moving nimbly, we didn't go outside of what the board already approved in that letter. So no new information was generated. But at the same time, it's a little sticky because we weren't able to move because we didn't have that. So that's gonna be really important the next couple of months. So if you have your first iteration in your November meetings, having a second iteration of talking points from your working group's point of view in December, by the time January rolls around, we'll be able to generate those advocacy letters and move nimbly along with this very quick process that's unfolding before our very eyes in some cases as our government restructures. And I hope the board is willing to do that work. And I'm also open if you have any questions or thoughts about how to do this work better. So it's okay. Go ahead.
I was just gonna move on to my next items, but if you're
Just a really
speaking on
quick
this,
comment,
I'll
you
wait.
know, because things will be moving quickly, it might be good to have this as a set agenda item to sort of, you know, what is politically on the horizon for almost each meeting for the next few months. You know, I theoretically, the concept of vibrant communities, you know, bundling or things we're bundling is fabulous, right? But the problem is that they're historically politically weak areas that tend to be more underfunded. And so I think it'd be good to stay on top of whatever we could do to, you know, get the best practical outcome of this, you know, as the community member said, you know, that there's a real concern of then dividing up you know, among more sort of weaker political services, a lower pot of money. But the alternative is also, you know, maximally vibrant community, right? So.
Thank you so much, Director Long.
I said a few more items. So speaking of city council, they're gonna begin meeting virtually exclusively starting November 29th because City Hall is gonna be closed for renovations in order to accommodate the expanded city council. Staff and invited speakers will be able to attend meetings virtually or in person here at the Portland building. Which will also be open to the public to watch any meetings and to provide testimony in person. So just wanted to let everyone know, although I think we're past for the most part when we're going to be providing testimony, except for maybe budget items. So just wanted to let folks know about that. Also, sort of old news, new news, Todd Lofgren and the property team were able to successfully negotiate a lease terms with PPS for their use of the Grand Bowl and Upper Field. So the lease is currently in the PPS.
In their hands.
It's in their hands, waiting for their approval. So we're really excited that we were able to move that along pretty quickly. And then the other item is the light pole safety project. You may have been following social media. The light poles, the replacement light poles have been installed at Colonel Summers Park. The contractor is currently at Selwood Riverfront Park, and then they'll be moving to Irving Park after that. So all good news. And then finally, just wanted to mention that I guess last month, we shared with you an update on our refresh of polling to inform potential ballot measures in 2024 to renew the parks levy and or to move a bond forward that could begin addressing the 600 million plus capital maintenance backlog that we've heard so much about. It was also a topic at the Financial Sustainability Working Group in October. And the polling has happened. So we'll be receiving some results back from FM3, and we look forward to discussing those with you all when we get them. It happened yesterday, 2 days ago, the last 2 days. Yeah.
Thank you, Director Long. Again, opening up the floor for any questions or comments. Nguyen, go ahead.
This is something I read in the news a while back, about the boats of the river that were destroyed. And I wasn't sure if there was any discussion ever, but I have two questions. One is, why is the boat inside the river part of parks responsibility? And second, what was the follow-up with that situation?
So you,
I was just gonna say that we have management of almost all of the docks in the riverfront, so that's the association, right? And
Yeah.
then you can talk about that.
if the boat is in the river but not tied to the dock, then it's Department of State Lands or Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. But if it's tied to the dock, then it's ours. Uh,
And if
And then,
it's tied to the dock and sinking, it's really ours.
Give props to the state. They set up a little fund for abandoned boats along waterways. And we're tapping that fund now for a boat that sank next to one of our docks that's tied up. Similar to the challenges on land, the challenges on water, there's a fair bit of, in the boating community, if you have a boat and you're right, it's kind of the end of its useful life, it's cheaper to give it to somebody untitled than it is to try to dispose of it or get rid of it yourself. So there's a fair bit of boats on the Willamette and the Columbia River that actually don't have ownership papers, where people will tie them up or, tie them to a dock or the land or drop an anchor. So that's many of the cases. So when we identify a boat that's on the dock, oftentimes we can't find the owner because the boat's been abandoned. And so that was part of the process. We followed up with all of the cases that were adjacent to our docks where we had problems with owner and sent them at the recommendation of the city auditor to file risk claims if they'd like to, but they don't because they don't actually own those.
Very complicated.
Yeah.
It is very complicated.
That's not an invitation to find a new Christmas present as a boat because it's tied up. All right. Thank you. Is that the conclusion of the director's report? Any other questions before we move on? Okay, moving on to the working group reports. So are there any questions for the Board Affairs Working Group? And we have Casey here to answer any questions. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you.
Any questions for the Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group? Thank you, David.
No, David has pushed his hand.
Oh, David, go ahead, please. My apologies.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
There we go. Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the issue. I put an action item in the report out for the Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group, and I think it would be really great to have Parks present us as a full board the proposal for the Darcel 15 activation plan, temporary activation plan. I think there's some challenges that we might want to address as a board together, and I didn't have the wherewithal to be able to put it in the meeting minutes last time. So I'd like to make sure that we get that on the agenda for next month. And Corbin, I think you and I have been emailing back and forth on this.
Yes, I have it on record for our next board agenda check-in that we will be discussing that. I
Awesome.
believe
Thank you so much.
if you go to our shared drive, you will see it in red for our next conversation. So I have it there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions before we move on? All right. Financial Sustainability Working Group, is there any questions for the working group? Or if there's a statement that the chair would like to make?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of mention that, as people may know, we have the BAC process coming up for the upcoming bump. And so for the next couple of months, the BAC and working group, financial sustainability working group processes will be integrated. And that'll be noted in the next notes.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. Any follow-up questions? Thank you so much. Moving forward with community engagement working groups, and I believe Sabrina is here. If you have any questions, opening up the boards. Do you have any questions? Thank you, Sabrina. Parks Levy Oversight Committee. Casey, any questions or any report ends that you would like to make?
I'm good, thank you.
All right, thank you, Casey. Moving to Programming and Recreation Working Group. Adam Lewis, I believe you have a short presentation for us. Is that correct?
Yeah, time permitting, if that's all right, Dr. Corbin.
We totally have the time.
Yes, we do.
Sweet. Okay, then I will bring up my screen here. All right, I'm going to ask the obligatory Zoom question. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so what I wanted to do today was just provide a short update on what we introduced a few months ago, which is the new working group specifically focused on recreation, arts, culture, and nature. And just to give everyone a bit of a refreshment, I'm not going to read from this, but just to clarify, the charter of this working group is, number one, to provide advisory support and review, to provide strategic recommendations when appropriate, and then third, to collaborate with Parks and Rec staff to achieve the goals in Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland, specifically as they relate to programming, arts, culture, and nature. And I listed them down below, the actual objectives and action items in Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. And what I wanted to go over today is really just give you an update where we're at, lead with a bit of transparency, a bit of accountability, and then open it up for the full board to ask questions before we narrow down into the working group again. So we're still very much so in phase one, where we've been identifying staff liaisons, but also identifying key focus programs. So taking a really critical look at what this working group is going to investigate and why. And a lot of that has to come from collaboration with staff. So what we did was we sent out a staff survey as well as a working group member survey to figure out what are the big ticket items that would be most germane for the board to weigh in on this next year. And we got an overwhelming response, which is frankly why it's taken me so long to get back to you. We heard from 10 different staff members across all different areas, as well as 4 different members of the working groups. And then from there went through a key concept analysis as well as a calendaring analysis. So in other words, we picked out what are the big ticket items that are coming in across staff members, where there were multiple requests for support on these issues, but then also segmenting them up into different months. So when it would be best for this working group to start reviewing and to bring in different staff liaisons into our meetings. And so we finished that analysis. And I wanted to just share very, very briefly what some of the key themes were across this analysis. In terms of recreation, overwhelmingly, there was a desire for us to weigh in on everything from the access pass to how we're getting more representative communities into recreation programs, and making sure that the offerings that the Bureau is offering match the needs of specific communities. There's also an overwhelming trend in asset management. So making sure that we have funds to improve assets. And I know we've all heard about the backlog quite a bit, so that was no surprise. There was also a desire for safety and security. So making sure that there's security in PP&R spaces, as well as ensuring that our built infrastructure is up to code, which is very much so akin to asset maintenance. And then lastly was figuring out ways that we can not only storytell our impact, but also create uniform measurements and KPIs across communities so we can see what's effective. In terms of nature and natural areas, specifically as it relates to programming, there's a deep desire to focus on natural resources, to also examine our emergency preparedness. And I know we're certainly going to talk about that later today. Also a desire to talk about defining roles, especially with the governmental system changing. And then lastly, and this is no surprise, is an emphasis on us examining capital projects. And lastly, in arts and culture, the overwhelming theme there again was focusing on capital projects, then again in inclusive programming, and also being really critical to make sure that we have representative budgets of the type of programming that we want to push forward. And lastly, what is going to happen next? So those of you that are in the specific working group, and again, this was, sending out the full calendar results and all the composites from all the surveys was really, really overwhelming for the full board. So I'm going to send that directly to the working group. There'll also be a poll to schedule when we want to have our meetings and what day works for everyone. And then we're going to align on priorities and, hopefully be able to have our first meeting and set up agendas for the next 3 months. So I know that was quick and a lot of information. Are there any questions from the full board, things that I can clarify either in process or in content?
Director Long, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Adam. This is Adina. I want to make sure that we're being thoughtful about not being redundant or duplicative as it relates to capital project and the budget conversations. I appreciate that they kept showing up as trends, like in all of the areas, and clearly, that this is not something that we're not aware of, but because we've got 2 working groups that are around infrastructure and land use and around financial sustainability, I would just want to make sure that the working group is being thoughtful as it thinks about its priorities, so that we're not being redundant. So that's just my comment.
Oh, I think that's extremely helpful, and thank you for voicing that. I think one of so just to back up a little bit, the purpose of this update was really to showcase our findings. And then in this next step, the working group is going to start agenda setting. So I think with that context of not being redundant, we can focus on a lot of the other big ticket items that staff shared.
Excited.
So Lynn, go ahead.
Questions regarding specific last item on art. How does your group's approach either parallel or tie into what's going on with the art talks? And how is that going to move into the future in terms of making things less complicated or becoming diverted?
I can start on 2 things. One, the city arts program coming over to our service area doesn't mean that it's coming into Parks and Recreation, right? So it's going to be a standalone office. We are absolutely having conversations about how we can supplement, complement, and align our work. In fact, Kelly has scheduled a commissioner retreat for some of the senior leadership to have conversations about what that would look like. So I think that conversation will continue, and we'll make sure that this working group is kept abreast of what that looks like. But yeah, I think there's definitely going to be, and we're really excited about it, frankly, opportunities for alignment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
I just wanted to say, I'm not as familiar with what that presentation was, but I think it will be helpful to tell you that there was a work session today that I'm racking my brain trying to think of how to bring you along in this quick process. And I've been here in this role for like almost 3.5 years. I've never seen a work session scheduled the same week. Like right now, it's so fast that work sessions are scheduled on Mondays for Fridays. That has never happened before. They're usually like, we know when they are. They're like once or twice a month. So I want to tell you that there was one today. And it would be really beneficial, I think, for you to listen to it because it was based on budget and what the priorities for all the council offices will be for the budget going forward. Really insightful, 2 hours. It's going to take some time, but I think it will be helpful. So if somebody can send a link, I don't know if you can do that. Somebody can send a link, that would be super helpful. And it will bring you along as to the decision processes that are happening right now that will happen all the way starting from now through May on budget.
I'll put the link in the chat.
Great. And I'll just say a hack is to put it on 1.5 times so that they speak a little bit faster, but
Right.
you can get
I
through
go
it.
for
about-
2, actually, 2 times.
Yeah, yeah.
And I might do it myself, but they start sounding like Alvin and Chipmunk.
There's a lot of jerky movement.
So it's a good pace where people's voices still kind of sound like their own. All right, any other questions? All right, thank you so much, Adam, and that concludes the working group reports. And we are moving to the Portland Parks Foundation report. Jessica Green. Hello.
Hello, thank you for having me. We are in the middle of fundraising season. So we're busy with that right now. But in the meantime, we have 2 kind of bigger projects that we're working through. The Thompson Elk Fountain is still in the design phase. So we're working with ARG and the Portland Water Bureau and to get through that design process. We've been through the 60% review comments. And we actually have a landmarks briefing on December 11th. So we can send information around that for all of those of you who would like to participate. But we're on schedule to complete about 90% drawings towards the end of December and fully hand over completed design work in January, and then the fun begins. And then the other project that we are working on with PPNR in the Commissioner's Office is our next phase of our playground replacement project. We had our kind of what we are deeming our pilot program out at Rose City Park Playground. And we've identified with PPNR 3 playgrounds, one in North Portland, one in East Portland, and one in Southwest to kind of combine as a little trifecta. And we're in this silent phase of the fundraising and working through the agreement, the MOU with PPNR, and hopefully launching that campaign more publicly in the new year, and ideally completing fundraising toward the summer with construction in 2024 and 2025. So those are our 2 bigger projects. We just wrapped up our Friends and Allies Summit in October. We are actively recruiting for new steering committee members. I can also send that link around if you know any community members that are interested in participating. It's once a month. You get to co-create our summit in the fall, which really is and more like a learning experience. Come in with deep dive workshops. You also get to participate in our volunteer award selection, which is just a fun piece and a way to kind of dive deeper into all the volunteer work that's going on in parks. And we are selecting our small grants recipients on Friday, and that is partially funded from the Community Partnerships Program, which is levy funded. So it's all exciting news that's happening.
Thank you so much. Opening the floor to the board if there's any questions.
Lauren.
Thank you, Corbin. So the 3 parks, as Jessica said, what we're calling the trifecta, are Portland Heights and George Park and Raymond Park that we're going to be putting playgrounds in. So I just thought you might want to know that.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments from the board? Thank you so much for your report. And we're moving to the emergency sheltering on our agenda. So we have Chris Carey, Haley Bonsley.
Yeah.
Bonsley, thank you, and our very own Todd.
And
Grace.
Why don't we go around, just do introductions real briefly, Chris? wanna
Sure.
start us off?
Good evening. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Carey. I'm the interim deputy director of the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management. Thanks for having me.
Hi, everyone. Haley Blonsley. I'm Mayor Wheeler's senior budget and policy advisor.
Good evening. My name is Grace Zarpak. I am the policy advisor for Commissioner Gonzalez's office, and he is the commissioner in charge of PBEM.
Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself too?
Yes, Kelly, Chief of Staff for Commissioner Dan Ryan, and I just want to take an opportunity to say this is a bit of a tough conversation. We're talking about sheltering, you're talking about homeless folks, and sometimes it's tough. And when we talk about tactical things and assets and risk management and finances, it sounds a bit cold. And I want you to know personally that these are some of the most special people, probably the top number of volunteers in these shelters. When we open shelters for homeless folks, they have my heart and a lot of my respect. So I just wanted to share that before they start speaking.
Thank you.
And I want to apologize to Grace. Sorry that I left your name off. I didn't see it on the agenda. So thank you for being here.
All right, so we have a short presentation and then I think we have time for discussion and questions, hopefully. And Michelle's going to share the deck, I think. So again, I'm Todd Lofgren, Deputy Director at Parks. Just to introduce this topic, Portland Parks and Recreation, for as far as I know back, has often, you can go to the next slide, has often provided a public service of being a cooling or warming center. So like on a hot day or on a cold day or where there's inclement weather, people can come into the community center, hang out in the lobby, use the public restroom, get water. And now even with the access pass, we have like an up to 90% discount for access even to our facilities. So people are using that for like showers and other amenities that we offer at the community centers. Over time, when we had weather emergencies, we would move into an overnight shelter situation when the city and the county declare a weather emergency due to extreme weather. And over the last few years, and especially during COVID, that use is intensified for a variety of reasons. And so that's been a change for us, both from operationally of managing the buildings, but also has increased the impact of who's being served at the community centers and displacing kind of the historic users of the community centers that are going there on a daily basis. And the shelter community that's staying overnight oftentimes is different than we're serving during our normal daytime hours. So that's led to user conflicts between the two when we try to keep both going. So oftentimes we're shutting down our normal operations and then transitioning into a shelter site, turning the site over to Multnomah County to manage. You can see over the last year, we just pulled like 12 months of data. We've got about 20 days where we closed community centers for shelter use. And if you go to the next slide, you can see we just pulled like one of the closures just to give you a sense of the types of programming that we're canceling due to moving into shelter operations. So that's everything from, we have preschools, as you all know, or we might have free meal programs for adults, seniors, kids throughout the day. Meals on Wheels is one of our partners. And then you can just see all the list of different types of recreation activities you would normally have on one of our, and Multnomah County is oftentimes most interested in our largest community centers on the east side. And so normally for a variety of reasons, they're not interested in Southwest. So they're interested in Mount Scott, which is soon to be closed due to construction, but Charles Jordan and then East Portland Center, and sometimes Mount Fishman. So just to give you a sense of, for us, what one of the concerns we see from a staffing level is that we're displacing users that need these social services to begin with. This might be a place where they're going to get meals, and especially during hot weather time periods, we have higher level of concern because we might have seniors, for instance, that are coming to our centers normally to cool down. And we're saying, actually, you can't come to the center, it's closed, or if you come, it's going to be a very different experience than you're normally used to. And so then maybe those seniors are staying in housing that's not air conditioned. And so, you know, one of the ideas we've been kicking around lately is like, is there a way that we can embrace during peak times where there's weather emergencies, especially during hot weather months, like bringing the population we serve into the community center or an overnight shelter? We've never done that before, but from a staffing level, that it seems like a better fit from us, but we've raised that with Multnomah County in the past, and we haven't really got any traction, and that might be a good kind of pivot. Haley and Chris to kind of share like how we've been trying to manage the shelters with the county in the last couple of years, and then the opportunity maybe for the Parks Board to weigh in with your questions or suggestions going forward.
Sure. First off, hi, again, I'm Chris. I'm the Deputy Director over at PBEM, and let me just take the opportunity to say publicly what I say privately. Adina and Todd, thank you so much for being wonderful partners. I like to say emergency management is a team sport. So it's really good to have some excellent players on the field. So one of the things that you know, Todd wanted me to talk about is a little bit about the life cycle of an emergency declaration, especially in the severe weather space. I'll preface that with saying that this is actually, I believe it's my 6th month with the city. So I'm relatively a new guy, but I can speak. I've had some awesome experience with everyone here at this table and with some previous agencies. And I'll kind of talk a little bit kind of through some general terms. So first off, National Weather Service is kind of our arbiter of what is severe weather and what is not severe weather. And generally they have good forecasts that they publish about 10 days out. And after 10 days out, if we see something kind of on the horizon, we have our duty officer program, which is our 24/7 kind of 911 for 911 that is always kind of doing our best to keep a pulse on things like this. If they'll bring that to, you know, leadership's attention. If it, you know, the forecast as we get closer to that incident, if forecast confidence is increasing, maybe about 7 days out, we'll start, you know, I'll start ringing Todd. I'll start, you know, making sure that Haley and Grace are tracking what's going on. And then we start getting more detailed briefings from the National Weather Service. But it isn't until about 48 hours out, 2 days before the actual event hits, when you have forecast confidence hitting about the 70%, that 70% mark. Because I want to say it's even 5 days out, it's a coin toss. As far as like, hey, we think this is going to happen, but it could or it could not. And I was just in a meeting earlier today with our partners at PBOT, at county, and with the National Weather Service saying, hey, how are we getting the message out if there is an event that is even more of a curveball, like the 10 inches of snow that happened, you know, not too far. Yeah, not too far ago, not too long ago.
1 PM, nothing, 3 PM, everything.
Yeah, and how are we communicating that to our community? And what are we doing to set the community up for success, and, you know, government setting the community up for success. So as far as an emergency declaration, you know, is that weather event going to exceed our ability to provide the community services that we normally do? That's a political decision, and obviously that's one of the unique situations of why both Haley and Grace are here this evening, because on a day-to-day basis, my director is a direct report to Commissioner Gonzalez, but during a declared emergency, he becomes a direct report to the mayor. And the mayor, so that's a nuance kind of in that relationship. And obviously it is the mayor's prerogative to declare an emergency or not. For context, emergencies can be as close as, you know, hey, it's, you know, we have, you know, 3 or 4 days in order to free up some staffing in order to support an effort that could be like that could be supporting sheltering, or it could be going on for weeks and weeks. We are still in a declared emergency for the Camp Creek fire, and that is predominantly for some administrative measures and some procurement things that we need to kind of button up before we end that declaration. Hopefully knock on something. This is actually the conversation we have to have tomorrow. Hopefully this is the last one. So that's a little bit into the kind of the emergency declaration process. I wish we had, you know, more foresight and kind of, we could plan a little bit more to the left of these events. But really 2 days out is when we kind of become confident, or at least I'm confident enough to staff and start staffing things, start planning things. But before that, it's, literally coin toss. So before we go on to the next slide, any questions just about process for that? All right, if you'd be as kind. All right, so we're talking about thresholds. So these are the Multnomah County thresholds that the Multnomah County Emergency Management has currently posted on their website, and they came to after consultation, not just between emergency management, but it was the Department of Human Services, it was the Department of Public Health, both county agencies, and then the Joint Office of Homeless Services. Now, we are supportive of these because, we don't, the city doesn't have a human services department, the city doesn't have a health department. So although we can have opinions about this, this isn't necessarily something that we have the administrative mandate or the technical expertise to really field something and say, hey, yes or no, this is, coming from the technical experts at the Department of Public Health. As Todd was talking about a little bit earlier, the trick with these is one, and I'm still trying to pull more data from the more granular data from the National Weather Service about, hey, what has been our activation frequency for the past 5 years, but with the realities of climate change, these events have been increasing, both hot and cold. They've been increasing in frequency, in complexity, and intensity. So it's increasing in frequency. Yes, calendar days that these thresholds are met. It's completing in intensity. It's not just 1 inch of snow on no notice. It's 11 inches of snow on no notice, and it's increasing in intensity or complexity, in that it's systems that are challenged. It's just not individual things. So it's not just, we are. It is hot outside. It is hot outside, and then we're thankfully. It hasn't been an event up here, but a previous agency in Southern California, it's hot outside. And by the way, we're having brownouts. And by the way, we're having, other things kind of go wrong concurrently with that primary event. So, this is something that as optimistic as I like to be, I also have to be pragmatic so that I can help Todd and his team plan. But this is the reality of our world right now. So again, I've just been talking for a couple of minutes about something that's very complex. Any questions or conversation about thresholds?
If we could have a full presentation, otherwise we may not get through it.
Forgive me.
Really good about asking questions.
Okay, no, and then forgive me, I'll continue on, and I'm just not playing with the order. And at this point, I will kindly I'll begin the segue over to Haley. So because I've only been with the city for 6 months, I think we already, one of the first things I started when I was with the city was I think I started with the city on a Friday, and I was in one of these meetings the day I started. So that's how long we've been having detailed, earnest staff to staff conversations about, hey, looking at this winter, what are our thresholds? What are our event spaces? How can we, do things in time and space to make sure that we are forecasting out as best we can. And then, and Haley's been been taking point on those conversations since before I joined the team, and has continued from there. So I'll pass this off to Haley.
Hi, everybody. So I wanted to just provide you a very high level timeline overview of what the last 2.5 years of my life at the city have been. So similar to Chris, I started in May of 2021, and I moved to Portland at the end of May. And at the end of June, we had our massive record-breaking heat wave, and I was the one running the Portland Building shelter. That was the first time the Portland Building had ever become a shelter. I had never worked in a shelter, and half the staff didn't show up, and neither did the person that was supposed to be leading the site. And they said, "You look assertive, onward." And I was like, great, this is off to a good start. But I wanted to give you an idea of how we kind of became aware of what was happening in the shelters, because that was fairly new to the city at that time, to be doing true shelter work. And so I was consistently present in those spaces. I've probably worked almost every day of the activations we've done for the last 2.5 years. I primarily work the overnight shift, which is the longest shift. So you get to see people at night around 10 p.m. all the way through to like 7 or 8 a.m. the next morning. And it gives you a really good picture of kind of how the day went and how the next day is going to go. And that's why I work those shifts, giving a better bird's eye view of how we can improve. A lot of issues spotted throughout 2021, a lot of liability problems, safety concerns for guests and staff alike, sanitation issues. It runs the gamut. We were really fortunate to bring on our PBEM Director Ahmed, who just had a little baby boy, so he's not with us tonight. But we brought him in specifically to provide us better guidance on like how to do this type of work and to get us aligned with national standards and practices. And he's been amazing in helping drive these conversations. And so we engaged iParametrics, which is a consultant about midway through 2022 to start doing reviews and assessing our responses during severe weather. That's what SWS stands for, sorry, severe weather sheltering. And so those folks were with us through the summer, and we were really excited to present those results to the county in the fall with the hopes of kicking off some planning conversations for how to do this work more effectively. And we got about one meeting in before the county pulled out of those conversations. Now, between, you know, winter and like early spring, we saw a change. Oh, sorry, April 2023, not 2022. I messed up on that slide. We had a change in the chair, right? So Jessica Vega Peterson took her position as chair over the county. And so we were in the midst of doing the work largely November through February. And then again, attempted to sit the county down and have a conversation in April of this year to say, look, guys, it's really getting bad and challenging, and we need to come up with a collaborative game plan for how to move forward. So we drafted a joint charge letter that was supposed to provide some framework for discussions between the emergency managers of the county and the city, so that we could have true partnership discussions. And we hosted our electeds, so the mayor, Commissioner Gonzalez was on at this point, another leadership edition in 2023, as well as Chair Vega Peterson, to talk about our concerns and offer a timeline for formal planning. All of the electeds agreed to participate. So our policy teams from the city and county began meeting in early June. And by late June, we had not accomplished a whole lot because we would make decisions in the policy team setting. And then as those would trickle down to the staff level for implementation, we got a lot of pushback from county staff about implementing the things that we were agreeing upon. And it was a lot of, no, that's not what was said, or that's not what was understood on our end. And so we had to go to our electeds and say, we've made no traction. And so they said, okay, we're just going to limit it. We're going to take out the representatives from the bureaus. This is where Chris and Shaw drop off, folks from the county. And it's just Grace, myself, and a representative from the chair's office in these conversations. And those kick off throughout this summer. And we got, I would say, about 90% of the way through an agreement. And then I received a call in early October from that representative saying that they're going a different direction. And they were awarded around $1 million that they're dedicating to their emergency response, which they're pinning for paying contractors to run severe weather shelter sites. And I'll get into more of why we're supportive of that, but it still left a lot of questions, right? Because my initial question was, great, so you got it, like this is yours now. And they said, well, we still might need facilities. There still might come a time where we need staff. So that's when I just put it in writing in an email to say, here's our remaining questions, get back to us, because at this point, since we're no longer having our partnership discussions, this is just internally what we need to know to direct our bureaus. And so Grace and I had to draft some really uncomfortable responses because we were hoping to do the good work. We were really hoping to have a true partnership and to be able to form and shape some of these policies and processes. So it's been a massive disappointment on our end. And so that's been, late October to date. We sent off our kind of understandings of what we're willing to do and asking for some clarification on other pieces, and we're still awaiting a response. Next slide, please. So just some key issues so you can understand the lay of the land in these conversations. we've been asking pretty consistently to be a partner, meaning that we have some influence in what we're doing and how we do it and when we do it, right? So Chris brought up the thresholds. We wanted to reassess those thresholds to really make sure we are aligned with national standards and that we're being realistic about our response matching the context that we're seeing. So for instance, if it is 32 degrees and we're not seeing an inch of snow, we're seeing a half inch of snow. That's where it gets wiggly, where they say, well, it's pretty much the threshold, so we should activate. And then you have to start looking at other contexts, right? And factors that would influence activating or not. But we were asking to be true partners at the table. The county to date has treated us like a resource provider. They're making asks of us, we're giving of our facilities, our staff time, et cetera. So that's the key first difference there. The second is the difference in approach. So we do come at this from a very clear emergency management lens. We are here to provide life-saving measures to folks. The county is a human services, a social services provider. And so they have a very different mindset when they're coming into these activations. And whereas we would like to, provide a slew of services to folks coming into these shelters, we are constrained by our capacity to do so. And capacity meaning the amount of facilities we have, the amount of staff to make sure that the shelters are safe and adequately run. Looking at just like the trainings we're able to provide folks. Can we give medical care? Can we have a behavioral health support present? Do we have security on site in case there's any issues? So all of those different pieces play into, from the emergency management lens, the level of response that you're able to provide. Optimally, we would be able to do all the things all of the time. But we are just not resourced in that way. And we do see diminishing returns the longer that we are in a state of emergency. The first day or two, we might see a bunch of volunteers come out to help. But by day 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, it's like Haley crying in a corner, like convincing her coworkers that it's really fine and they should come in and help her. And so that's a really big point where we don't agree. And so without the planning that we've been requesting, we have to rely on, our response being based on the finite resources available to us. And that is not something that they echo. In terms of capacity, I kind of already touched on that. We've been, pushing really hard to have dedicated sites for sheltering, knowing that we will need to expand into community spaces, right? For unforeseen events like the freak snowstorm that shut down the whole city, or for, the horrible ice storm that happened last December that lasted for like a week and had negative temperatures. So we understand that there's always a potential to expand, but we do know that severe weather is not going away. Climate change is here to stay, unfortunately. And we also have to get realistic about what is a true emergency, life-threatening situation versus what is honestly just very, very uncomfortable for folks. And 100 degrees is uncomfortable, but we can mitigate it through, better outreach and providing resources to folks. That's not necessarily a factor in and of itself that should, activate a shelter. And so we have some clash there as well. Contingency planning, we are the early and often crew. We want to sign on nonprofits and local businesses and the state early to say, what are you going to give us? Let's create some plans. And the county tends to wait until we are in a state of emergency before beginning to, or like just anticipating a couple of days out before they begin reaching out to partners to ask for an assist. Security. We want it. That's the simplest way to say it. I, again, have worked these sites and there are just some situations that I physically am not able to manage and I need backup. And that does not mean that we do not approach with a trauma-informed lens and that we don't give folks respect and try and de-escalate as much as possible. But seeing some of the incidents that we see, there's just a need to have that support available. And same with health and sanitation. We don't always have the best rapid response for biohazard cleanup. I'll leave that to your imagination. But we cannot require, nor would I want to require our staff to clean up biohazards. And so that does fall on people who just need it to happen. And then you just kind of got to suck it up and do your best with the materials that you have. And that's not appropriate. So next slide, please. So moving forward, where are we? Great question. So we outlined some questions for the county and also outlined some expectations. That's why it's gaining and also providing clarity. So the first piece about roles and expectations for the city and PBEM, basically we've communicated that PBEM will continue to be looped in and they will field emergency management support requests on behalf of the city, you know, working alongside our partners like Parks to see if we can fill those requests. We did ask them to provide us with more information about their contractor capacity and their plans for closing the gap. The last figure I heard was that they were anticipating needing about 800 beds over their current shelter bed count for the coming winter season. And they've indicated that they have contractors that can support up to 400 beds for 24/7 operations. So obviously a pretty big gap. And that's where our questions about where the city's coming in become really important. So we have asked them to put in writing how they plan to close that gap. That also goes to the contingency planning. They said at 80% capacity filled, they would begin activating contingency plans. We asked to see what those plans are and where the city falls in those plans. And then in terms of resource use, so the NETs, our neighborhood emergency teams, fantastic folks. If any of you are one, thank you. And our city staff, we've been very clear that we like the contractor first approach. Subject matter experts should absolutely be the ones first and foremost in those spaces. I always use the term Sue from water when I'm referring to like a general city employee. I've learned there is a Sue in water, surprise. So she's lovely, I hear. But you know, we don't want to have folks that don't have the training in the background in there first and foremost. It's not the best approach. Also trying to fill med roles, behavioral health roles, all these other pieces that there's only so much training we can provide and we can do a lot, but that's just asking a little much unless we are in a true state of emergency and people are just triaging as needed. So we've made that pretty clear that we need better training for our staff and our volunteers and security at the site so that we can be safe. In terms of facilities, and I know that's where the majority of your interest lies, we've consistently communicated since I've come on board that we need to have dedicated sites for sheltering and that city sites should be a last resort. We know, and the county has communicated that their focus is not to pay for or to rent or buy any type of temporary site to act as a severe weather site because they feel it's so few days a year that they can't justify that type of investment. However, they did let us know that they've kickstarted their incentive program for community spaces to act as severe weather sites. So a community program with an available facility can get some funds to act as a tapped facility over the course of the year. Now, we don't have an idea of how they are communicating that out to the community, what kind of interest they're receiving, how much they're incentivizing. We don't have those details at this time. What we did ask for is a facility sourcing strategy. We did clarify that none of their contractors come with sites. They are staffing contractors. And so they're going to be filling the facilities that they've typically contracted and filled. And so we've asked them what their sourcing strategy will be. They've assured us that they are going to work in good faith to find alternatives. We've asked them to specifically provide a list of facilities that they're looking at, what the use of that would be. So is it a center? Is it a shelter? Could they do 24/7 operations? You know, the location, the point of contact, to get a better idea. And then as a guideline, when requesting city facilities, we've asked that they basically provide us proof, an updated list of that same page of who they reached out to and what they responded so that we know that they've actually moved through options in the community before coming to us to request a facility. So we've laid out some guidelines for that. Again, facilities as a last resort, making sure we're upholding our existing policies unless we provide exemptions. We've also noted that we want unarmed security present at any city site that's being used for an activation, regardless of employee presence, because we want to make sure that our policies are being upheld and respected. And then also using sustainable flooring to protect better and also minimize the time it takes to mobilize and demobilize the community center, so we can shorten that up. And then the last thing I wanted to emphasize here is it is important to remember that these are community facilities. And as I said, if we get to a point of needing to expand, we absolutely will, right, uphold the need for life-saving measures above all else, and we'll activate the spaces. what we're trying to do is make sure that these resources are being used when we are in true times of emergency and mitigating as much as possible the impacts to programming that Todd described. And that when they are used, they're being used appropriately. And in a safe and sanitary manner. So in terms of what we've been told moving forward, the county initially during our negotiations agreed to a March 2024 deadline to provide us with some what their capacity building work would look like and how they would stage that across 2024. And we're still waiting to confirm if that date is still an active date to them, given that those negotiations shut down. But from what I understand, they still intend on doing that capacity planning work and are still wanting to bring us on to do long-term strategy. And so we, as always, will remain open to working with them as partners, but given the timeline that I put in front of you, we are doing what we need to do on our end to make sure that our bureaus are prepared, so.
Thank you. Does that conclude the presentation? Thank you so much.
Yeah, so wasn't a good way to end it, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm not talking over anybody. So if we can also have the presentation sent out to the board members, that'd be great. I'm gonna open up the floor to the board. Are there any questions or comments? Bonnie, go ahead. I'm controlled by Patty.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Chris and Haley. I really appreciate it. I have so many questions, which is why you are glad you didn't take questions as you went. I'm trying to think about how to narrow the questions in a way that is helpful for the discussion. Let me go back to your thresholds slide, because you identified these 4 thresholds: 1 below 25 degrees, 1 greater than 1 inch of snow, 1 below 32 degrees with driving rain, or this very nebulous declaration by the joint office, right? Which seems like very squishy. That one is obviously the most subjective of the 4 thresholds. And I guess I want to understand better, the functioning of the joint office. I know it's gone through some evolution. And clearly that partnership is part of the challenge here, I think, with the partnership with the Bureau of Emergency Management that you're currently trying to address. And I guess I would like to better understand. I'm trying to think of how to say this, how that partnership might facilitate the partnership with BEM in a way that would be most productive, because as you noted, our concern as a Parks Board is mostly, obviously we're concerned about these community members without question, but of course our other concern there is the displacement of the existing programming and the communities that are using these facilities for their intended purpose. So I'm just trying to get at the partnership between the city in terms of the joint office, which I understand is really mostly run by the county, even though it's referred to as a joint office. Is there something there that can really help the partnership with BEM in a much more meaningful way?
I can take the joint office part of this.
Sure, I was about to say, that relationship is managed primarily out of the mayor's office, so I'm in some weekly meetings with the joint office, and we are moving a couple of things in the same direction that's led out of Mayor Wheeler's office.
I would say the quick answer is no, because that partnership is under renovation as well. And so you have 2 connected but different efforts that are underway. And really, if we're thinking about emergency response and needing to shelter in times of fire and flood and everything else that can go wrong in the world, and QM's really screwed me up working with them and telling me all the things that can go wrong. Volcanoes. I moved here without knowing there were volcanoes. And so I think that our goal is that we are able to activate spaces that are usable by the community. I don't think that anyone kicked up this effort with the intention that they were primarily serving homeless Portlanders. I think that that was a consequence of just kind of where we are, right, in our time as a city. And so when we're thinking about folks that have nowhere to go and no resources, of course, you know, the focus is going to be how to connect them to that. And so that is where we've tried to get creative in years past, where it's been, you know, PBEM deploying AC units to apartment complexes or to houses at a discounted rate, so that those folks don't have to have that competition of, wow, do I want to put myself right in this environment, or right, go to, you know, my home that doesn't have adequate resourcing. And so the short answer is no, because both efforts are under construction and hard to connect. And the longer answer is a lot longer. So
I guess what I'm trying to get at is in terms of alternative shelter sites, right? I mean, as a public sector, you know, we do have an obligation to address these needs, right? And I don't have a problem with that. I guess the concern is, you know, when we've activated other spaces that aren't being actively used by specific programming that some would argue is needed by the community. You know, things like when they activated the convention center or other types of publicly controlled spaces. I mean, is that something that is being more, where is that in the conversation, I guess?
we do have to pay the convention center when we use it. That is not offered as a free resource. And we have to ask to use it because they have their own hosting things that they've dedicated themselves to, which is why we can't always access it. And, you know, we've begun to reach out to partners, like the Lloyd Center has been amazing in being like, listen, we're a mall, let's do this. TJ Maxx left. Like, let's use that space. And so you see people stepping up, but that's kind of our push to say, like, let's reach out to the nonprofits. Let's reach out to like Friendly House in the Northwest. I don't know if anyone's familiar with them. Like, they were like, listen, you know, we could probably help out, but people have to be asked the question. And so that's more in my mind, the planning push of like, put the ask out there, let the community respond, and then you have a better idea of filling the gap that the community can't account for. We do see a lot of spaces that are more willing to act as a day center than an overnight shelter, just because of the facilities available. You know, you're going to need a lot more bathrooms, you're going to need a food area. It's a whole, you know, a clothing station. It's a lot bigger of an effort to host people for 24 hours a day than it is for 8 hours. And so, and again, we see drop off. People can do it for 2 days, but you know, they really can't do it for 3, 4, 5 days. So yeah, we should be looking into all those avenues, but we are in a constant state of asking. And I think that that's where more dedicated conversations around community partnership should be had.
And much to your credit, as that conversation has matured, you know, we are at the point, just like you said earlier, where, hey, if the county does come to us with an ask, we are asking them for the checklist of the partners who have not been able to meet their needs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just for the board moving forward, if we can make sure that our questions are succinct, so we can make sure that everybody gets a chance. So I have the order of Patty, Casey, Alana, Ally, and Adrian. Go ahead, Patty. Thank you.
And maybe this is just an education. So, you know, we talk a lot about shelters as far as the context of a severe weather, which is probably the majority. Is there a separate pot of funds for like the seismic event? Because it seems like this should be parallel, because, you know, talk about sheltering. I mean, whether you shelter a couple days, I mean,
Yeah.
we have a severe seismic event, which is coming.
Yep.
It seems like we should be working together, and that should be, you know, we need almost purpose-built shelters that could sustain a number of people for weeks. And, you know, what are they doing?
Work at PBEM.
Yeah,
That's what
I
our
mean,
What do they do in California? I mean, this
So
is.
yeah, no, so just this is not a problem set that is easily solved, and this is not a problem set that we are alone in attempting to solve. But when I was down in Southern California, that was definitely that was very front of mind. And one of the things that I'll credit the state of Oregon with that California has not done is one, just, you know, inspiring individual preparedness at a level that California has not. If you go to the state of Oregon Emergency Management's website, they encourage people to be 2 weeks ready, which is a whole heck of a lot. And that's something that my wife pokes fun at me for, for hiding water and food around the house. So we are 2 weeks ready as a house, but it's something that, that is a goal that we need to meet. And two, the Oregon Department of Human Services, which fulfills the mass care function at a state level, has dramatically increased their efforts in the past 2 years in order to help fuel that. But even with that, I think they've gone from a full staff of 2 emergency managers to approximately a staff of 50. Just to kind of give you some scale, since the 2020 wildfires, they are still, not meeting the need as described in studies. I mean, when I say it's within the first 48 hours, it's going to be tens of thousands of people after the Cascadia event. So there is going to be a large need there. There is, constant conversation about, hey, how can we dovetail this? Because, just like you're saying, no matter what, there is going to be a large event that's going to require a lot of mass sheltering. And how can we get some synergy between these two? And anything I'm
We do
missing?
not have funds dedicated within the budget for the city, for that specifically for seismic events. We did create a $1 million set aside for emergency response, which we tapped during the strike. When we did an ED then, we did it for the severe weather sheltering, we did it for fire, we did it for an air quality issue, and that fund was completely depleted within the year. And so yeah, like we had to create a resource in order for that to then become immediately zapped. We did put specifically in our request to the county that if they wanted us to incentivize staff to fill positions at the shelter sites, that we would be requesting reimbursement for paying staff to do that. And we haven't historically done that. We've absorbed that cost. So I'm trying to get us some money.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Just to make note that, are there any public comments? We are just past 6:45. Are there any public comments? All right, moving forward, Casey, please go ahead with your question or comment.
Thank you, Corbin. I apologize for being not on the screen, but I was in the dentist chair 2 hours ago and I'm still drooling. So I had 2 really fast questions. One's probably more complicated than the other one. My first question is, where's PPS in all this? And if they're not as part of the conversation, why not? And then my second question is, what can we do? I feel like we should ask someone from the county to come in and tell us what they're trying to do. Because what historically what they're doing now does negatively affect parks and parks programs. So we have the ability to investigate this. Thank you. And I really do appreciate your presentation. It's given me much better understanding what's going on than I had before.
I'll take the PPS question. I know that we have been in conversation with the schools. The tricky thing is when they are in session, they can really only give us the weekends and not necessarily if they're hosting like sporting events and other things. Because usually we would be using their cafeterias or their gyms, which are the 2 spaces that are typically occupied during the weekends. And then they are full of kids during the day, and we just can't mob and demob that quickly to use it in after school space. And also we know that, and you all know this, folks don't exit quickly and far away from a shelter site. And so we want to make sure, given our other regulations at the city, that we are not putting people in a position to like camp next to a student space and like kind of positioning them to violate other policies and things that we have going on. So that's the PPS side. I didn't catch the except are we asking the county? I don't want
to follow up and I'm going to give other people, but my concern was over the summer, especially when we're having more and more hot incidents and schools are closed. And then my other question is, what can we do to help, if anything, to help you guys move this along?
Director Long?
Yeah.
Can I possibly make a motion if we are really interested in asking these questions, because we are at almost 6:50. Is the board willing and are staff available to extend the meeting by 15 minutes at the most to answer questions? So I'm putting that out there. Is that possible for staff first? Yes, it's possible by staff. Do I have a second? So we have a second.
Can we take a 5-minute break? I have to go get my car.
out of the garage
yes.
before it.
Yes.
There's a parking garage that closes at 7.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
So would love to say.
So we can. do
Also,
something with this.
yeah.
Cover the
Okay, so the motion is on the table to extend the board meeting to 7:15 to accommodate the questions on this particular agenda item. All those that are able and willing, if you can vote aye. Or raise your hand or a thumb up. All right, wonderful. Are there any people who are voting no?
Two
Any
people that
votes?
need to leave at 7.
Okay.
It
Two
looks like
people.
a lot of does.
Okay, so it sounds like we still have
My hand
quorum.
is up for my hand being up. I put a thumbs up to vote yes. Apologies for confusion.
So the motion passes that we're gonna extend the board meeting to 7 PM to accommodate the questions. All right, moving.
Would it
forward.
be possible, sorry, Ally here, would it be possible to get the folks in who have to leave at 7 for questions first?
Absolutely. Is that you, Ally?
That is me.
Alana, are you willing to allow Ally
Happy to
go
let
first?
Ally go first. Absolutely.
Thank you, Alana, really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. Ally, go ahead.
Yeah, wondering, so wanting to reference the 2021 December audit that showed that the city is unprepared to support people with disabilities in an emergency and event. Wanting to know how far you all have come and how that is showing up in how you look for partners and how you move forward with this work.
Well, I can start off that answer, and I'm very happy to say that in a PBEM leadership meeting today, that was a point of conversation in how we are continuing to, like, the way I like to phrase it is it's not a chocolate chip, it's the sugar in the cookie. It's completely inseparable from the actions that we're taking. It needs to be the fabric of what we're doing. So that's just, that is a constant internal effort within PBEM of making sure that we are looking at a lens of equity and ensuring that we are accessible to those with access and functional needs and the whole community. How we're kind of moving that forward. We are right now kind of PBEM just completed an organizational assessment by an external contractor, and that contractor taking that interaction into account was recommended that we bring on potentially either a specific individual to make sure that function is well represented. And we're looking at how, can we do that? Do we have the budget to do that moving forward? Or is that something that we can complete organizational training on to make sure that we are representing that in all of our work, even if we can't afford a specific individual to constantly physically represent that in conversation.
Thank you so much. Adam, I do understand that you cannot stay on. Did you have a question before you have to go?
No, thanks.
All right, thank you, Adam. Alana, you are next.
Thanks. I have two quick questions. I just want to add a comment before that, which is I hear that there are some publicly owned locations like the convention center that can say no and get reimbursement because of displaced programming. And I hear that locations owned by the city do not have that option. I just want to note that discrepancy between different publicly owned locations. I do have two questions. The first is we've been focusing tonight mostly on winter, and I'm wondering if the city is looking at different factors when we think about the use of parks facilities in the winter and the summer. It seems like what constitutes a life-saving event and what hours might be necessary might differ. As color commentary and an example of that, I worked in a summer shelter this past summer where somebody said the temperatures in their house wouldn't be low enough to be safe until probably midnight or 1 a.m, but day shelters closed mostly at 8. So they didn't need an overnight shelter, but they needed something with longer hours. So I just wonder if the city's approach to heat and cold events is different. And then I'm also wondering, as we think about communities that are displaced for relief sites, whether it's overnight or just daytime, if we're thinking about whether those communities are just one step up in terms of their stability, and if their housing is just one step up from folks who are unhoused in terms of the shelter it provides, and how that might be weighing into the decision making about what resources are available, and if that's something that is brought up with the county at all as we think about total safety provided in all of our different layers of resources.
Excellent. I'll take a swing at your second question first, and then I'll go back to your first question. So please remind me if I neglect to answer your first question. But to answer your second question about kind of the nebulous utilitarian arithmetic of, but like, I think, I wholeheartedly agree with your sentiment that we need to look at the community as a whole. And how are we best serving that? And I can tell you that at least in the conversations that I've been in the last 6 months since I've joined the team, I know, Grace and Haley have been, representing that the same, is we want to be sure that we are not, just as you're saying, we are not displacing someone who's one step away from being houseless for that community, or if so, how are we trying to serve that community as well? One of the efforts that Haley began to talk about a little bit earlier was I believe that some county nonprofits, or some nonprofits that are active in the county that are trying to get out specifically for the summer events and just give out air conditioners. That was one of the things that when I was working for City of LA Emergency Management, that was probably the most effective thing we could do for people in heat events is give them air conditioners. And then, you have to work on the messaging side of it. And down there, we were having a lot more issues with the grid than we are up here, thankfully. But, just doing our best to set the conditions and just completely, sidestep the emergency, because now you've got an air conditioner, and now you don't need to come down and enjoy the community center. You can come down and enjoy the community center. So that is very, that point is front of mind. And forgive me, your first question, if you briefly remind me, and then I'll be off and running.
I'm wondering if we're looking at the needs in summer and winter differently.
Yes.
And also,
Okay.
if we're looking at the effect on program in summer and winter differently, where it feels like there might be some things short of sheltering that we could do in the summer that would be helpful. And also the people we're serving, to the point in the presentation about seniors. I think Todd mentioned seniors who are using community centers to cool in during the day, even if it's not a formal center, things like that. Are we looking both at the need and also the impact on other users differently for those two types of events?
Yes. So first off, for your question about summer and winter, yes, we do look at those events quite differently, because winter events are primarily going to be an overnight, because that's when the highest hazard is. And in the summer events, we're looking at kind of late morning or into early evening, because that's when the highest hazard is as well. Part of the thought process going into summer events is we lean on our National Weather Service colleagues to talk about things like overnight recovery. So if it is dropping 20 degrees at night, that will affect, or if it is not dropping 20 degrees at night, that will affect the decision to keep cooling centers open later. As far as the different programs that are affected by each of those, a winter shelter event versus summer cooling center event. They hit different, because they're, like I was saying earlier, they're increasing in frequency, intensity, and complexity. They are affecting more programs more frequently, which is why I'm so thankful to have a partner like Haley going out there and saying, hey, what have you thought about the Lloyd Center? Have you thought about all of these different community organizations? This is one of the things I love about the city of Portland is there are so many active community organizations out there doing great work. And part of the job of PBEM is stitching that together into something that can be actionable in an event like this, where we can say, hey, we might not be able to equate a community center, or we can equate a community center by having 10 beds here, 5 beds there, 20 beds here, and stitch something together like that. So that's part of that. Forgive me, yeah, go ahead. Grace.
I'll just add very quickly, PBEM also has a co-ad, which is called the Communities.
Organizations active in disaster.
Correct. So they are wonderful in that they have also organized, there's a lot of sheltering, a lot of assistance that is going on in the community that you don't hear about. And that is orchestrated through PBEM, which can be argued that that's something that the county should be doing, but PBEM is saying, hey, community, we want to hear how you need assistance and then help you find that assistance, whether it's during winter or during the summer.
And there are, and forgive me, Grace, let me kind of pick it up from there. And there are efforts to, for specific communities that don't traditionally have a positive relationship with government. We have been doing things like, setting up misting stations with them about, getting them air conditioners so that they can kind of reinforce their community in their own space and kind of, and be safe, build their community. And also I think that's a kind of one of the pressure relievers that we try to do to decrease the need on parks facilities. And that's also kind of end up, working with water, talking about misting stations, splash pads and things like that for summer events.
And I will say that I joined later on when Commissioner Gonzalez started just in January, so the last year. And so I commend Haley for doing this for 2.5 years. I know a lot of your question was in regards to thinking about those communities that are maybe one step away from experiencing houselessness. And that's something that I have to say in every conversation that we've had with the county, that's something that has been very clearly said to us from Todd and Adina as well. And we've taken into those conversations with the county so that they understand where we're coming from and the communities that we're trying to represent the whole community, not just a certain facet of the community. So we've conveyed those each and every time we've met, and it's been frustrating to get the answers that we have gotten so far. So I'll say it that way.
But it is really helpful that council is so supportive of
And
like,
united.
and
Yep.
united
On
and
this.
aligned and like what is upsetting and what needs work and what needs to be fixed and addressed. Like, I don't think any commissioner, the mayor is not confused about like what is needing to change. And that is a very good feeling in government to be like, wow, 5 of us agree. Yeah. So, and to feel that support from the bureaus as well. Like, we echo your frustrations. We're experiencing them alongside you. And so it just, I know it's like a very thin silver lining, but it's nice to feel aligned internally when you are facing difficulties externally. So.
Thank you. And just in the queue, we have Adrian and Sabrina next. Go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah, so thanks so much. I also understand much better now what's going on and all the conflicts involved, and it sounds like a very difficult situation coordinating with the county and so on. But my question to you is, so when it gets down to us selecting city sites, right, for these emergency use, who makes the decision on what those sites are, kind of in priority order?
They make the request of what sites they would like based on like their awareness of the buildings that we operate. And so
The
on that,
county does?
the county makes the request
Okay.
of us.
Okay.
And so that has traditionally included all of the more than none of the community centers and then the Portland building. And one of the primary reasons that we were able to move away from use of the Portland building was, one, our employees coming back to the office spaces more and using those during the day, but 2, it's very difficult to seal off the rest of this building. And so people can make it to the 2nd floor, as probably most of you did, and coming up that stairwell. And without security and appropriate staff, it's very difficult to make sure that people are not finding their ways into all parts of this facility. And so those concerns were a key in us saying, like, we can't just have people go missing somewhere in the building. And so, and then for the community centers, a lot of that is just because by design, those are more usable spaces for the type of sheltering they're looking to do. We mostly own office space. And so we don't have a lot of big rooms except for this building, right? That has that big meeting space in the back corner and in that front center area. And those are the two operational areas that have been used in this building.
And
So
what-
yeah.
What are the other sites besides, so you said Portland Building?
Portland Building,
community
community centers, they
where
use
else?
Multnomah County East as one of their sites. They use Cook Plaza as another one of their sites. Those are county facility owned. They have, what is it, Cook? And then they'll tap like the Market Street shelter. They'll go to the Ivy Lakes, like
Thank you,
those
yes.
types of facilities. And they'll start asking those folks, Salvation Army, Arbor Lodge is another site that they'll use. The fact that I have all of these just like floating in my head scares me a little. So yeah, those types of spaces.
Yeah, I think the point that I'm trying to make is that, you know, it's getting to the point where it's unacceptable to use the community centers because of the reasons that were outlined, especially during the heat emergency times, because basically we're displacing other at-risk people, right? So there's this unintended consequence that has a health effect. And even during, you know, the cold emergencies, there are folks who are using the sites for showers, that are, you know, elders at risk who are using the sites for enrichment. I mean, can go on and on. So the city has to have some sort of a rational way to be able to basically say no. You know, when in the past it's been different, right? Because it was rare, but now it's not rare. So where do we go with that? You know, who's really making the decision, and what expertise do they have to say this is reasonable to use this site? That's my question.
And they're, the folks that the county engages in those conversations, historically at that policy level have been their Health and Human Services Department. So they're engaging their Environmental Services Department, their Health Department, joint office, like and we are vastly outnumbered on those calls because we don't have any of those services because that's not our charter. And so those folks, and that's kind of the approach difference I was trying to describe. What you're saying is like, at what point do we say it is, at least from what I'm gonna summarize, when is it worth it to place this need above the programming? And from an emergency management perspective, it would be when that is a life-saving measure, right? Like when we are at the 110, 112 degrees outside, and like it's no longer feasible for people to be outdoors for hours on end, right? And that's why I was trying to describe with like 100 degrees is uncomfortable, and people can absolutely still get heat stroke and encounter health issues. But there are other things that we can do to combat that rather than taking over a community center, right, for a weekend, because we're seeing 100 and 101 for 2 to 3 days. And so that's what we've been pushing for on these calls. And what has historically happened is we get put between the rock and the hard place of, we don't think we should activate, and the county says we think we should, but we have the facilities. So then it becomes, well, are you going to be a good partner? And if I could get $1 for every time I've heard that sentence, I would not need this job. But that's the issue, is being kind of positioned in that way where there is no effort that's going to happen if we do not give that resource, because we became the plan instead of the last resort or the backup plan. And that's why we've been pushing for greater capacity on their end. They need to build those relationships. They need to identify facilities so that we're not having conversations about, you know, canceling programming when it is not a life-saving measure.
I mean, the other frustration is obviously the lack of county spending of the homeless money that they have. And so some objective measurement of what extent this emergency house, you know, during extreme weather events is actually a homelessness problem. You know what I mean? That should have funding, hotel rooms, whatever it takes, right, out of that pot.
You know what's new? I just want to contribute. What's new is that people like you are saying these things that have not been said before about the county. This is new for us to be in meetings like this and have people say, hold the county more accountable. And so it
Seems so
might be,
obvious
it
to
might
say
be,
that.
it might be the right time for this conversation, because this has been a conversation for years. So this is good news. Yeah.
Or even that there's awareness that there is funding on the table that's not being utilized, whereas we are dedicating funding not towards city chartered, right, like goals to take over responsibilities like the Safe Rest Villages, like the task sites, to try and lessen the number of folks that are unhoused that would need these types of services. So like, that's a perfect example of us using the funding available to try and mitigate and still not seeing that same like partnership back. So yeah, I 100% agree. And that's the approach difference that we've been trying to highlight, is you're no longer in emergency management territory. We get there for probably 6 or 7 days out of the 20 that, you know, Todd outlined. But for the other 13, yeah, you gotta handle it.
Thank you. Sabrina, do you have a question?
I just more of a comment, and I agree with what a lot of people said, so I won't repeat it. And I know we're pushing up on time, but I think it's important to note that even when we are in those emergency states, we're looking at who are these shelters serving and benefiting, and are we ensuring that we have spaces that do benefit families, that benefit that are conducive for young children to be in as well. Because you know, Rosewood, we play as big of a part as we can in emergency preparedness. You know, we've done the AC distributions and in partnership with the county, getting our community members, diverse community members prepared and with information. But nonetheless, you know, a lot of those shelters, when they do activate, are not conducive for families. It's not a diverse space. It's not what many would call a safe space. And so that's very important to note as well. I won't repeat what I agree with what most of my counterparts said, but that's something that I don't think I heard, so I wanted to say it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina.
I haven't had a chance to ask a question, so I'm gonna ask you a slew of them. But the first one is, will you be willing to come back maybe in May or June as you're starting to deal with the heat island effect, and you know, everybody loves to use that, but dealing with the hot weather. My series of questions, whether you can answer this or not, are you looking at other models in other cities? This is a person that's coming from the East Coast, in which this happens every time. And was around as an intern in the electric company while we dealt with that 1995-96 crisis around heat. So are you looking at other cities and replicating what they have, or are you finding it's a uniquely Portland, you know, intergovernmental issue that is preventing you from moving strategically?
The director that we hired is also East Coast and comes with all of that knowledge. So when we were like, oh, it's, you know, 32 degrees, he was like, and like, okay.
But it's also a situation that, you know, a community member can have access to air conditioning.
Yeah, for sure.
But they don't have the access to funds to pay for it the next month, and so they may not actually use it. So there's
a creativity there, yeah.
I believe there are some nonprofits also operating in that space, and that's also another way we are, and forgive me, I might be conflating my past agency. There might be an effort here, it might be a hangover, but of looking at, so if there's a community center like a church or a synagogue or something that says, hey, we're going to stay open for an extra 6 hours and we're going to keep our air conditioning on, to try to help them cover the delta of that electric bill. Because if they're serving an open public, if they're serving the public, if they're staying open, if they have this increased cost, that's something that, at least I believe, is that
That's a previous.
That's previous
We've
agency
done putting out the AC units. I don't know if we've ever done direct like cost assistance, or like payment assistance rather. But in terms of your looking at other models question, the answer is yes. And we're also an industry leader in some of our models. Like our net teams are a national leader in what they do and deploying into the community in the way that they do. The COAD would be a model that you would see in other cities to like activate within neighborhoods and within like you're saying, you know,
within different
spaces of
community centers,
worship, like, so I would say we are open to all creative ideas of how to approach this. But it's just the numbers of folks that we're seeing in the hundreds and the thousands, that it's like, yes, we can have family house help. We can, you know, have
But it would be safe to say that the limitation is the relationship.
The limitation
I mean,
is
that's
the
right.
structure of the
Right.
city,
That
one,
is the
and then the
problem
relationship
that
with
was
county two, because we don't have that health and human services component. We can't ask for state resources unless the county wants to ask for them. We have to, by legislation, go through them as a conduit to ask for state assistance for these emergencies. So that in itself is like a huge barrier.
So with that said, and I think we're getting a lot of new information, I'm trying to be strategic with our time, so we're not here at 8 o'clock because the board doesn't want to do that, I'm sure. But with that said, is there a strategic plan in place in which there's a community process that we can have these open conversations? Because it sounds like you probably have a lot more support. Pushing back or maybe thinking strategically with or the county in ways, is there something established to bring the community into this conversation?
There's not any like established body that I know or process that is in play to do that work, no. And I think that that's still largely in part to being very nervous to take on, much like we did with the task sites and the Safe Rest Villages, to take on a body of work that we are going to absorb a great cost for. Now, I think that there is a lot of room for PBEM and it's COAD and the NETs to do, you know, some strategic work around like our city efforts and how we're supporting in community. But in terms of being responsive to like the need that we're seeing, we do not have the resources to be able to do that work effectively.
So I will suggest that the capacity of the board, if you can come back like before each of these like seasons where you're gonna expect extreme weather. So maybe now in November and then in May, in which we can have these conversations if possible.
I think May is a great time because we'll have had a response from the county on whether or not they did their planning or not by then. So we will have.
I think there's like immediate opportunity to testify in council. There will be lots of opportunities where the joint office comes up related to shelters, related to the contract that we have with them ongoing. And it's coming in the next couple months. And so that I'm clocking in my mind things to share with you as
Okay,
these come up.
perfect.
Until the
That's-
numbers lessen, we will primarily continue serving houseless Portlanders in these sites because that's where the greatest numbers are of folks that are turning out. And so Kelly is absolutely right that until there is a more permanent solution to the houseless issue that we're experiencing and putting people in like meaningful spaces that can do this type of work, that like our hands are pretty tied. So, and that's where we were saying like the relationships are both fractured, but yes, very, very tied in their successes and failures.
We are at time at 2 minutes over, my apologies. But I want to thank, is it the carpenters? Yes. The carpenters that got us a hand gavel, which is most successful, most accessible gavel that you can have. So I'm going to conclude the meeting, if that's okay for everybody.
Can I just say one thing?
One thing.
One thing.
How many
Where-
words?
Where's Metro?
Oh, I have no idea.
So that's a good question. We are unsure. So concluding the meeting at 7:17 PM. Thank you, folks.
Good night.